What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with another podcast. What's going on in pop culture right now? Got a good one this week. Pixar's Inside Out 2, The Return of the Boys Season 4 on Amazon Prime Video, and then some new albums. We have No Worries, The Return of Anderson .Paak and Knowledge after almost 8 years with Why Law, the second album, Normani's long-awaited debut album Dopamine, and Nayeon from Twice, her second solo album Nah. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See links below. Get the best of 2024 Spotify playlist also linked below. Let me know it's good, and let's get into it.
What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Nayeon's second solo album, Nah. Nayeon of Twice, the first Twice member to go solo 2 years ago, back in 2022, with the debut solo album, I'm Nayeon, an album I liked quite a bit, honestly. Really fun, summery, light production and vibe throughout. The lead single, Pop, big hit, of course. I also really like the B-side, No Problem, with Felix from Stray Kids. Thought that was a really catchy song. Since then, of course, more Twice members have gone solo. We had Gio's solo debut last year. You had the Misamo subunit of Twice with Mina, Momo, and Sana. And now Nayeon is back with her second solo offering, the first Twice member to give us, a second offering. And only a few months back from With Youth. Twice is a full group, remaining very prolific, releasing multiple projects every year. Simply put, Nayeon's second solo album, Nah, is my favorite K-pop album of the year thus far. This really blew me away, really knocked me out for how different it is. It's a really impressive sonic evolution for Nayeon. The last project, very light, very summery, very in line with what you expect from Nayeon in terms of her contributions as a member of Twice. But with Nah, this is a very vibrant project, lots of horns, very confident, also a lot of hip-hop elements, not something I certainly expected to hear. The energy is so consistent throughout this whole project, it really impressed me. I like a ton of these songs. The lead single, ABCD, it really switches up what's going on throughout the course of the song. Nayeon's vocal performance matches that as it changes. There's an extended dance break in the video you don't get on the digital release. But throughout the track list, I thought Butterflies was awesome. I like Something. Magic with Julie of Kiss of Life, another big highlight. This really impressed me. I think this is incredibly coherent, consistent release. And the fact that it's such a example of a K-pop artist blossoming and really showing a different side, and that was what Nayeon has said was the intention with this, to have kind of more mature lyrics and just a different type of sound. I find that really impressive because I think this is really well executed on, and frankly, I would love this type of sound and find its way into some of the Twice music as well. Of course, Twice so prolific, so established at this point, that's probably a hot take to many of the fans, but it would be interesting to hear these kind of hip-hop elements on more Twice songs. It's a little different than what you usually get from like Jaeyoung, for example. And then let's going into the track list. I mentioned ABCD. I really like that one. But Butterflies, I love how Nayeon's flow picks up on that. There's some call and response vocals, sounds really cool. The tempo, though, is really awesome. Chorus, very catchy. Verse 2, just straight up a rap verse. Again, kind of blew me away. I was never expecting that from Nayeon. Definitely a huge highlight, maybe my favorite song on the release. Track 3, Heaven. This beat, slows it down a bit, more of like a sultry vocal performance from Nayeon. I think the breakdown for the chorus is just okay, but it's better once the feature Sam Kim shows up and they start harmonizing together. Then I think it sounds pretty interesting. And when Sam Kim does his piece on the feature, very smooth singing, really a nice match overall. Magic features Julie of Kiss of Life. In general, a choice feature, given that Kiss of Life has really kind of broken out this year with the hit Midas Touch. It's cool to see, kind of a contemporary of Nayeon be on this, considering Kiss of Life are not a JYP Entertainment group. You love to see that. Of course, the next song you have Lee Chun-hyuk from Akmu. That's a YG artist. So again, you'd love to see that. We'd like to see more of that, kind of bringing the walls down across all the K-pop companies, but I won't, get my hopes up with that. But Magic, super up-tempo again. I love how the way the synths are bouncing, very groovy bass. The chorus, big standout once again. And Julie, her rap flow really fits the beat. I think it's a really nice feature. Holly Golly, the piano kind of stands out on this one, but still up tempo. The kick drum's very nice, and then Nayeon's vocals this time just really smooth on this one. Something kind of a fun switch up on the second to last song because it's like a breakbeat basically, but Nayeon's spitting like she's rapping on that one. It's quite fun. And then the last song, Count It, to me this is the least successful song on the release of the 7 songs. It doesn't quite pop out as much to me. The hook's not bad, it's silky, but it just doesn't, I think, reach some of the highs of some of these other songs. And again, I think that speaks to just this is a really tight, strong listen. And if you're into and know the Nayeon and Twice sound to this point, it'll really kind of blow you away for how different it is and how exciting it is because of that. So I was a big fan of this. Again, I think this is my favorite K-pop album of the year thus far, halfway through the year. Long way to go, but I really like this quite a bit. And just like I really like Nayeon's last album and the fact that they're so different. I mean, she's really rising in estimation for me in terms of soloists right now. And in terms of, recent K-pop soloists, in terms of, solo work we've got from group members the last handful of years, I think her 2 solo albums really stand up against anyone who's been active these days. And that's really exciting because Twice have been around a long time. Of course, they're on their second contract with JYP already. Still very successful, very prolific. But it's good that Nayeon feels comfortable and willing to show new sides of herself and continue to branch out as an artist. You don't want anything feeling stale, and you certainly don't hear that on Na. But let me know, what was your favorite song? What was your favorite moment about Nayeon's second solo album, Na? Let me know, and for more K-pop reviews, more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Normani's debut album, Dopamine. Normani, of course, former Fifth Harmony member. It's been a long road to the debut album from Normani, as everyone knows it's been a big talking point in pop music, and just on its surface, it is funny to reflect on the fact that Fifth Harmony broke up in 2018, and Normani's now finally giving us the debut album here. In between this long stretch of time, it's been a lot of starts and stops from Normani. You've had really big features on massive songs like Love Lies with Khalid and the Sam Smith song, but even those songs are both pre-pandemic. It's been a minute. You had the Motivation single, kind of a boppy Max Martin song from Normani back in 2019, seemingly the start of a rollout that didn't go anywhere. And we've now learned that Normani had to take a step back from music in a certain sense because she had some serious family issues going on the medical front with both of her parents. So you understand that regard. Nonetheless, it is funny to, again, put us in this point where Camila Cabello is about to do a complete sonic reinvention for her next album. And yet we're just getting the beginning of the Normani, solo career. It is just funny, like, where the two of them have gone, to say nothing of the rest of the Fifth Harmony former members. I came into Dopamine with an open mind, knowing, Normani has had some personal issues delaying her music. And she's been self-aware about what's happened to this point. It's not like she's been oblivious to it. That being said, I didn't think her debut album, Dopamine, really had a lot to offer. I found a lot of this music, most of this music, pretty dull, pretty uninteresting. A lot of it has to do with the conception to me, where like the mixing on this album often drowns out Normani's vocals. We're really living in this mid-tempo range, and yet I feel like a lot of times it's quite washed out, and Normani, who has a good voice, she's like amazing vocalist by any means, but the beats aren't doing her any favors. Like, she's not standing out vocally on most of this music. And I understand that she's clearly going for, kind of a throwback R&B vibe for the most part. And there are some highlights on the project, like the song Little Secrets, like the song Insomnia. Take My Time stands out because it's actually kind of playful and fun and a bit funky. But a lot of the other songs, man, like, they just don't really go anywhere. It's just funny that, like, this is what we end up getting after such a long wait. Clearly, she didn't want to go down the road of her single Motivation, which was so poppy and boppy. She said that was too easy. Fine, I respect it. That being said, I just didn't think Dopamine really did a lot, unfortunately. The first song, Big Boy, kind of interesting. It's definitely half a Stara song. Shout out Stara, getting a big look here. Of course, she's written for big A-list people for years at this point. The Normani performance, though, kind of interesting for its aggression, although it is quite auto-tuned. Track 2, though, like, this is a song that's okay, like, but the hook is just pretty bland still. And just to me, it's just pretty low tier as far as this go. Then you have a chopped and screwed outro, seemingly for no reason. Like there was nothing interesting about the song to that point to really justify that, in my opinion. Lights On, I thought was okay. Beat gets a bit more interesting, but this is a great example of like the vocals just getting really washed out with the mixing. Take My Time, as I mentioned, more fun and funky. The beat's pretty energetic on the chorus with the keys, probably the best beat here. Insomnia also on the better side. I really enjoy the bass guitar. I really enjoy the bass, and the guitar outro sounds not bad. Candy Paint, one of the singles, and the percussion's pretty cool. Just again, it's a bit different vibe for the rest of the track list there. Distance, I think Normani's performance is quite strong. On Distance, probably her best performance on the whole album. But the mixing, again, is a bit messy. There's a bit too much going on. It's distracting from Normani's vocals. And I think it's just a bit of a shame because it's pretty good otherwise. I mentioned Little Secrets. I think that one's really good because like the beat really progresses as the song moves along. That's pretty fun. And then, kind of funny enough, at the end, you have the last song, Wild Side, featuring Cardi B. Of course, this song came out in 2021 as one of those stops and starts Normani singles that we've been talking about. Interesting that this still made the album and a song like Motivation does not. Of course, Motivation wouldn't make sense on this album, so I get it, but including Wild Side nonetheless. Two other features, of course, you have Gunna on 159. Gunna's been on a bit of a hot streak with features lately, although I didn't really enjoy this song too much. And then Tantrums featuring James Blake, pretty inspired for a duet from Normani. I think Blake is good, Normani is good, but again, the song just doesn't really do too much for me. It's just kind of like thrown together, two verses. So yeah, like I've been pretty negative on this, and I was coming in with an open mind because I think Normani as a pop artist, as an R&B artist, has been very undefined, right? So like the expectations were there. I didn't have any expectations. I was curious to hear what this would be, and yet I just didn't feel like this really lived up to any hype. And even taking the hype and the weight out of it, I just found it a bit dull. And would I have liked more songs like Motivation? Of course I would, because I enjoy that kind of big tent pop stuff. But comparing it to recent R&B works, I just don't think this really compares either. So, a bit disappointing. I'll be curious if Normani jumps into the pop world and becomes a much more active and regular participant. I think her fans would certainly want that to happen, no matter how they feel about Dopamine. So we will hope that continues. Of course, we'll be keeping our eye on the Camilla album coming out in a few weeks. Very curious on what that sounds like. And yeah, let me know. Did you like Normani's Dopamine more than me? If so, please let me know why. And for more music reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of NxWorries' second album, Why Laud. Of course, NxWorries, the duo, Anderson .Paak, and producer Knowledge. This is their first album release since Yes Laud came out in October 2016, almost 8 years ago. And of course, since then, Anderson .Paak, his status has continued to grow, really celebrated now at the Grammys, but really celebrated as a solo artist. His album Malibu, of course, a real masterpiece, one of my favorite albums of the last 10 years. And he's also, I think, thankfully, really justly been more commercial lately. 3 years ago, Silk Sonic with Bruno Mars really raising Anderson's profile. And Knowledge, certainly not as famous as Anderson, but incredibly prolific LA producer with an eclectic sound, a really vast discography, working with all kinds of people, also doing his own solo work, his own mixing work as well. Shout out the Meek Mill series that's now defunct. I knew we would eventually get more NxWorries. They've hinted at it over the years, and it's fun that we're finally here. And looking back on the past NxWorries work, of course, Yes Laud, and then the year before, the Link Up and Suede EP, it's more, I think, lighter, fun music, those two projects, especially when you compare it to Anderson's other discography. It's definitely more carefree. And what's really interesting about NxWorries' second album, Why Laud, this album represents a maturation of the lyrical subject matter, especially from Anderson .Paak. This is the first album to come out since he has become divorced. This is about Anderson taking some L's and trying to fix those. That's usually not the subject matter of a lot of his music, which is usually a lot smoother, a lot more fun, right? The lyrics quite impress me in that regard. The beats, at times they sound a bit sparse, but they're quite involved. as expected from Knowledge. There's a lot to these beats, kind of jump around a lot of genres, but the rap and B, R&B vibe that you expect from Anderson .Paak, largely what we're doing here. And Anderson .Paak, of course, he's never boring as a vocalist. His rasp, his nasally delivery really stands out. So he's able, I think, to elevate any kind of beat he's on. And ultimately, it's a very consistent and smooth listen, even if it's, I would say, less playful, less banger indebted than some of the early NxWorries work. But it really feels like a progression and a maturation for this duo. I think that's what we would want, coming up on an 8-year wait between albums. So I found it pretty successful. I liked most of the songs on it. I also want to shout out Stones Throw Records. This album actually came out 1 week ago on physical. Of course, now it's out on digital as well. Long album from the track list wise, 19 songs, a lot of interludes throughout this, a lot of short songs as well. So overall, I feel like it's pretty packed in here. 86 Centra, the first real song. This was the lead single and kind of the comeback announcement for NxWorries here. 90 seconds, really no hook, just bars, kind of a sparse beat. Didn't wow me, but it was exciting as the announcement, what it meant more than anything. But it then features really excellent mixing transition from Knowledge into the next song, Move On. Very smooth, great storytelling from Paak, kind of classic Anderson performance. Really like this song. Notable co-writers on this, Andre Day and BJ the Chicago Kid, that stood out to me. The next song, Keep Her, featuring Thundercat. Got Thundercat singing smooth as butter on this song. Some kind of fun, like acoustic kit work from Knowledge. Love the flow switch up. Anderson's rapping kind of like laid back, but as the song might suggest, you understand what he's getting into. We're getting into the heavier stuff already. Really love the chorus, the money won't keep her part. Thundercat taking us out at the end. This song's really great. The next song, Distractions. Short, but I enjoyed like the guitar strumming. Song kind of picks back up at the end. Leads us into an interlude, leads us into a song with Her, which I thought was just okay. The next song, Daydreaming, I liked quite a bit. The guitar line along with the snares and the guitar solo, pretty fun. From Here, the second single with Snoop Dogg, it's okay. Doesn't really wow me as much. I think this is where if the kind of sparseness, the mid-tempo-ness of this record would stand out, it's on songs like this where it's like, this just doesn't pop as much as it probably could have if they were trying to make different kind of music, But it makes sense that they're not making something super fun given what Anderson's singing and rapping about. Fall Through, I thought Anderson's singing was very silky on this. Some fun, playful lyrics as well. Enjoyed the drums, enjoyed the guitar. A lot more texture on this beat compared to some of the previous songs preceding it on the track list. Battlefield, like this one quite a bit. Might be my favorite song, at least from how it sounds. A lot of rapping on this. Chorus, kind of sped up flow from Andy. Big highlight for sure. Here I Am, kind of another heavy one. A lot of relationship storytelling lyrics from Anderson. Out the Way stood out to me for the Ray Kali feature. I thought she was very inspired, fun vocals. Of course, another smooth chorus from Anderson. Really enjoyed this one. She Used, I'd be curious to hear more like this in the future. It's basically Anderson .Paak's take on like the baby voice, the pitched up baby voice we've come to know quite a bit in hip hop from people like Playboi Carti. Honestly, it kind of fits the vibe. Shout out Knowledge for making this song work, but it's pretty cool. Never remix featuring Charlie Wilson. It's short and like you barely use Charlie Wilson. I would have loved to hear more from him on this. Walk On By featuring Earl. You have kind of guitar in the background, drums in the foreground, another breezy chorus from Andy. And then Earl, it's just fun to hear him on a beat like this, given that, Earl type beat the last 5 years. It's been a certain cup of tea at the very least. It's fun to hear him a little bit out of the norm, even if he's rapping the way he usually has been rapping lately. I think it works. So yeah, like I mentioned Battlefield, but like overall, it's not an album where I think there's like a huge highlights on it. It's certainly not as fun to revisit as Yes Lord, let alone Anderson .Paak's solo work. But I do think it's a pretty cohesive and coherent album. The lyrical message is very consistent throughout, and the maturation it's presenting in terms of what has happened in Anderson's personal life the last few years and him laying that out with the music here. I think it's pretty cool because it's a bit different from what he's done thus far. Of course, very much anticipating the next Anderson .Paak solo album. The last one of those, Ventura, was way back in 2019. It's quietly been a long time. Of course, Silk Sonic and now this have come out, so he's hardly been away, but very much anticipating that when it comes out, maybe in 2 years, we'll say. But let me know, what did you think of NxWorries? Why Lord? What was your favorite song? What are you most looking to hear from Knowledge or Anderson next? Let me know. And for more music reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of The Boys Season 4. The first 3 episodes have come out on Amazon Prime Video. We've now learned from showrunner Eric Kripke that Season 4 is the penultimate season of The Boys. The next season, Season 5, will be the final season. So we're approaching the end game. And it's just great to be back with The Boys, 2 years since the last season. But since then, of course, we got the first live-action spin-off of The Boys, Gen V, also on Prime Video. And I thought that was a really successful spin-off in kind of all regards, but still directly tying into the main Boys story in, I think, a pretty meaningful and satisfying way. And I'm looking forward to seeing more Gen V when we get Season 2. But now back to the main attraction. And The Boys Season 4 is really giving you everything we've come to expect from The Boys. And I think the biggest thing I continue to look for with this series is that it will remain fresh, it will remain interesting, it will not feel repetitive. And so far, it has not done that. The Boys, of course, incredibly dark, incredibly gory, but also very prescient, very familiar, very uncomfortable. It's not a fun watch at times. And does the show beat you over the head with some of its reference points to current events and its inspiration points? Of course it does. To me, it still hits very hard. That self-awareness, albeit it's very dark, that's what I find so refreshing about this series, especially compared to most IP storytelling, most superhero storytelling, obviously. Anthony Starr's performance as Homelander is very impressive still, and frankly, deserves even more praise than it ends up getting. We know The Boys is memeable. Everything about the show is kind of clicking. Some new stuff this season, Jeffrey Dean Morgan approaching, obviously, plot progression. Nothing shocking per se. Along those lines, I hope The Boys can find a way to maintain high stakes. Not that there's not a lot of death on the show, obviously, but with the introduction of secret suits, with the introduction of Temp V in past seasons, there are surprises, and there's, you have to, I guess, kind of lend your disbelief that the Boys crew in the show continues to both stay on the show in terms of making sense with the plot, but also the fact that they're all still alive, right? You just kind of have to let things like that go, I guess. That being said, I think the kind of progression of the Victoria Newman character to the vice presidency, and also her heavy involvement in the spin-off Gen V, has, I think, made the plot pretty interesting, especially when you compare that with kind of the other side where you have Homelander following his spiral in Season 3. Homelander is incredibly unhinged, but also incredibly open, right? Openly calling for changes to government and world order. Again, you understand the reference points with who Homelander is supposed to be. We get it. We don't have to say it. There has been momentum and change in that regard with the storytelling. The introduction of the Sister Sage character as this new soup, this new 7 member who is a new confidant, a new ally of Homelander that Homelander actually respects, unlike, the sycophantic other people we know, such as A-Train and the Deep. Sister Sage, also incredibly scary character to see, right? The intellectual brain thinker type that openly will associate and prop up an obviously evil bad actor. One thing I'm curious to see how it progresses, in the first episode specifically, you see the kind of open conflict following Homelander's trial, where you have the Homelander supporters and then kind of the opposite side being propped up as the supporters of Starlight, of Annie. And, it's kind of the good versus the bad, right? And I don't want the show to do any both sidesism. There is no other side that's just as bad when it comes to Homelander. I don't think we're gonna get that. So we'll see, because ultimately The Boys has never shied away from the bad guys winning, from the darkness, right? I'm not expecting that to change. And given that we're in an election year, it is a particularly gloomy time, unsettling time to watch The Boys when you understand what The Boys is saying and what it's relating to in real life. Some other stuff, new Black Noir, a new character, a new suit playing Black Noir. We'll see if that amounts to much besides Noir being in the background like he usually is. The Deep, still maintaining the relationship with the octopus in secret. We'll see what happens. And I think the other probably central premise, right, beyond the core plot progression, is the dueling fragmentation of Butcher's psyche and Homelander's psyche. Homelander kind of having the midlife crisis as he is in fact aging, and then Butcher literally is dying due to his abuse of Temp V last season. Butcher has brain tumors. Butcher has less than a year to live. Butcher clearly is talking to himself, seeing visions. Things are not well. So we'll see what happens with all of that. Ultimately, like, again, the fact that the Homelander character is so well-rounded, it is not a one-note villain. It is not hacky or hokey in any way to me. And Starr's performance goes a long way with that. But the character is pretty smartly written and remains very compelling. So I will be curious to see like how The Boys progresses. Again, we're in the penultimate season. We're approaching the end game stuff. Things are getting more open, right? Homelander's antics have changed, right? How he's moving. He's not afraid of bad PR like he used to be, right? So I'm curious to what degree The Boys can operate as a show with the plot being a lot more, I guess, inflammatory, right? So we'll see. It's a rare IP show that warrants like this much thought, this much dissection in terms of what it's doing, what it's referencing, and how it's moving forward. And of course, it still has fun action, surprising shock value, great humor at times, a lot of dark humor. So I remain a big fan of the show, looking forward to seeing how season 4 goes. Of course, looking forward to Gen V season 2, and then, of course, The Boys finale. And I'm sure post The Boys season 5, Gen V will continue, and I'm sure they'll keep this world going because it's really been a home run. But yeah, let me know how you're feeling about The Boys season 4. What are you most curious to see happen? What are you keeping your eye on? Let me know. And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Inside Out 2, the new Pixar film sequel to Inside Out way back in 2015. And this film is coming at an important time for Pixar. It feels like the last few Pixar films we've been saying that, but I think this is truly the case because Pixar seems to be getting back to its commercial good graces that really fell by the wayside with the pandemic. Of course, with Luca and Turning Red going straight to Disney Plus, Lightyear underperforming, Onward having its legs cut off by COVID, Pixar had been in a box office slump and a lot of fear with Disney training audiences to wait for their high-profile films to just hit the service after a short window, much faster than the previous home video window had been. This had been really concerning, right? And Elemental last year opening quite poorly, but Elemental did really leg out and actually became a pretty successful film in the end, kind of against all odds. And now Disney and Pixar have publicly acknowledged that they're pivoting to more commercial, albeit safer choices, namely sequels to already successful Pixar franchises. And Inside Out 1 was incredibly successful, huge blockbuster, huge grosser. And Inside Out also, frankly, is Elemental but better. So making a sequel to Inside Out 2 is not shocking to me. And I think the best thing about Inside Out 2 is that it's a pretty logical next step forward for a sequel. Riley, the main character of the first film, of whose emotions we spend all our time with, Riley is now a young teenager and she's entering puberty. So having the emotions change, new emotions, more nuanced emotions such as anxiety and envy coming into the mix, it's a pretty smart choice for a sequel. That being said, I didn't find Inside Out 2 groundbreaking thematically. Ultimately, it's pretty safe. It's pretty lacking in conflict. It's kind of straightforward. There are certainly clever things about it. I think in general, the manifestation of emotions and the master dashboard where the emotions program the brain, I think that's pretty amusing still. And there's some genuinely clever stuff like the sarcasm being a canyon and brainstorm literally being a storm. Those are amusing moments. But frankly, I found Elemental almost more of a more thrilling, entertaining time, even if it's kind of less involved thematically. And Inside Out 2, frankly, it just felt kind of more Inside Out to me. And I think kind of the film's need to really kind of put plot momentum into the story, just for the fact that this is a kid's movie, right? This cannot just be for adults who are appreciating the nuances of trying to portray all the emotions that go into, human thought, right? There has to be quest elements to the story. Joy and friends have to go somewhere to achieve something. There has to be MacGuffins, right? And that we just need those core like film tenets for the film to kind of function and move along, especially when you have it, especially for a young audience. I think for me, like having anxiety voiced by Maya Hawke be the antagonist makes a lot of sense, and I think the setup is pretty strong. But ultimately, like anxiety is not like a hard villain or by any means, right? Because anxiety is still on the side of Riley, like all the emotions. They all have the same goal, even if they have their very different methods, right? So it is pretty low stakes because things are going to work out. There's really nothing that's surprising about what you're seeing. And like again, like it's kind of funny to think about the existential Pixar cluster we've gotten relatively recently, right? With the first Inside Out, its sequel, as well as Soul from 2020 and Elemental last year. And again, I think Elemental is like kind of the most rote and surface level thematically of the bunch, but to me it's actually the most fun to watch of all of them as well. Obviously the first Inside Out one is the strongest, but also Soul is probably, I think, the deepest and the most existential of all, right? And as a result, it's also probably the least child friendly. So it's kind of interesting to reflect on all of that. And I honestly, like, it doesn't seem like we're going to be getting anything like that anytime soon from Pixar, from all the messaging we've been getting out of Disney. One note I did have, I saw this on IMAX screen, notably a digital IMAX screen, and some of the picture quality didn't look super great to be honest to me. Like the close-ups of the emotions, often it was of joy, where I don't know, it almost looked a little pixelated, a little fuzzy. I've never had an bad experience at that IMAX before, so I don't really think it was the projector. I don't know. It didn't look super great at times when it was blown up on a gigantic screen. I'd be curious if anyone else had similar feedback on that. Also, I did find it kind of amusing that, hockey, again, a huge plot element of Riley's life, like the first Inside Out. It is kind of amusing to me to see like a very multicultural hockey team, just because hockey is one of the waspiest, most affluent, whitest sports, we have. So it's just kind of idealistic in a good way. I have no issue with it, but it just made me chuckle because I was like, there's like probably no hockey team ever that's looked like that. And lastly, it is great to see that seemingly Inside Out 2 is going to be a huge hit. The tracking domestically was actually bumped up to 90 million. We'll see where that ends up settling, but the box office surely needed a big hit and some good momentum coming here after Bad Boys 4 did well, Inside Out 2 looking to do well, Despicable Me 4 keeping the youth audience momentum going, seemingly will be doing well as well. So yeah, I think Pixar needed the win. Disney needed the win, the whole box office and industry needed the win, and even if I think Inside Out 2 is ultimately really a lesser version of its predecessor in every regard, it's still, I think, a welcome addition and, solid Pixar entry. I would have this in definitely the second half of Pixar films, just because it, like, in terms of Pixar sequels, right, like, I guess you'd take this over Finding Dory, I suppose, but, like, this doesn't compare to any of the Toy Story sequels. It doesn't compare to even Monsters University to me, which is probably a hot take, but I fucking love that movie. I thought that was really fun. But yeah, let me know, what did you think of Inside Out 2? How did you like it? How would you compare it to the first film? How you feeling about Pixar these days? And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
All right, that's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, we have House of the Dragon. I'll talk about the first 2 episodes. I'm away, so can't get to it this week. Also going to talk about the new film, The Bike Riders, starring Austin Butler with Tom Hardy and Mike Faist and Jodie Comer. Very exciting. 2 new Jeans songs. They're Japanese singles. Excited to hear those and compare them to the songs we just got. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod, see links below. Get the best of 2024 Spotify playlist link below. Let me know it's good, and I'll see you next week.